Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Canyons business meeting. Today is June 20th, 2023, and we're meeting at the district office located at 9361 South, 300 East in Sandy, Utah. The first item is to approve the agenda for tonight, June 20th. So if I can have a motion to approve the agenda, I will take that at this time.
I move to approve the agenda.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion to approve the agenda. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion to the motion? Okay, seeing none, I will call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Now, the next item on the agenda is to have the Pledge of Allegiance by Dan Harper, Director of Legal Counsel. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, Mr. Harper. Now we will go on to our Canyon Strong student recognitions, and Jeff Haney, Director of Communications, will present those.
Thank you, President Schill, for this time that the board grants us to recognize the students in Canyons District who have gone above and beyond to prove to the world that we are indeed Canyon Strong. Our first honorees tonight are the Presidential Scholars for 2023. Both of the state's Presidential Scholars for the year come from the home of the Huskies. And Mr. Millerberg is very proud of these two students, Michael Ogden Chen and Priyanka Matthews. They were announced by U.S. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona as the state's Presidential Scholars. And he said U.S. Presidential Scholars have always represented the future of our country and the bright promise it holds. The White House Commission on Presidential Scholars chooses these scholars annually based on their academic success, artistic and technical excellence, essays, school evaluation, transcripts, as well as a demonstrated commitment to leadership and community service. So congratulations to Michael and Priyanka, this year's Utah U.S. Presidential Scholars. Hillcrest also is home to 3 National Merit Scholars, Lauren Andrade, Samuel Martin, and Priyanka Matthews. She had quite the end to her senior year. Our National Merit Scholars from Canyon School District. We congratulate the Huskies who made that list. They were chosen from a talent pool from more than 15,000 finalists in the 23 scholarship program. Now, the winners are chosen by a committee of college admission officers and high school counselors. They look at each finalist's academic record, scores from college entrance exam, and leadership in school and community activities. The students who are in the running also are asked to write an essay, and they are to get a recommendation by a school official. Hillcrest students, Lauren, Samuel, and Priyanka, were chosen as National Merit Scholars, so congratulations to them. We also want to congratulate the Corner Canyon Chargers. Once again, they have shown us that they can bring home the hardware to Canyon School District and prove to the world that we are the District of Champions. They are the 6A champions in boys lacrosse. This is the 3rd consecutive state championship that the Chargers had claimed in boys lacrosse. And the Chargers won, according to the Deseret News, in a, quote, stunning display of offensive firepower. The final score, 19-5. Congratulations to the Corner Canyon Chargers, the state champions in boys lacrosse in the 6A division. And our next honorees, the class of 2023. Where you can see there, they were wearing their colorful robes and mortarboards. We had about 2,500 seniors cross the graduation stage to receive their high school diplomas. And what a day it was. For photos and video of the commencement exercises, you can go to Canyons District social media pages and the website. There are full slates of photos of our students, their parents, their teachers and friends. They were all celebrating this big day. Now you'll see here a smattering of photos that our staff took of that day. We bid our congratulations to Alta, Brighton Corner, Jordan Hillcrest, and Diamond Ridge. Those are the high schools that had a class of 2023. We also captured some fun photos of the completion ceremonies of the Canyons Transition Academy and Jordan Valley School. Those are some of the most touching events we hold each school year. For Canyons District graduates, it all starts here. And as the Naval Admiral William McCraven says, what starts here changes the world. President Schill, thank you for the time for our recognitions for those in our community who have truly gone above and beyond in the quest to show the world that we are Canyon strong. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haney. We have now come to the patron comment portion of our meeting. The board often designates time in meetings to listen to the patrons of the district. Patron comment time is limited to residents and taxpayers of Canyons District, students and parents of students and current employees of the district. Patrons may provide board members with written comments. These documents must be submitted to the board secretary at the meeting. I pointed over there. Or emailed to the Office of Public Communications by noon of the day following the board meeting. Tonight, individuals will be given 3 minutes and those representing groups will be given 5. Comments made during patron comment are part of the public record. It is the board's practice to listen and take notes during patron comments. The Board of Education does not discuss matters that are not on the meeting's agenda nor engage in public comment on individual students to protect their privacy or employee issues. If a patron wants to comment on a district's employee's character, professional competence, or mental or physical health, the board requests that those comments be submitted to the board in writing. However, if the patron determines to verbally comment on those personnel issues, the comments need to be civil and refrain from personal attacks, insults, defamatory, or slanderous comments about an individual. The Board of Education would like to make it clear that critical race theory is not part of the curriculum being used by Canyon School District. There are no plans to incorporate it into the curriculum or instruction in Canyon schools. The Board of Education values input on all sides of issues. To maintain decorum and respect, we ask that those in attendance refrain from applause or other types of demonstrations during the patron comment time, as well as throughout the meeting. Comments must be age appropriate, considering children who may be present or viewing online. Okay, so we have one patron that is signed up, and it is Spencer Mears. So if you could come forward.
I'm here once again representing someone whose child was abused and bullied while at school. This is what she had to say. My 6-year-old son took his own life back on September 14th, 2016. You may have seen his story on the news. He was bullied for 7 years. The principals and school districts swept every attempt we made at informing them of the bullying he was going through under the rug. He was not just bullied, but he had several attempts made by students that they were going to kill him. He was held underwater on a school field trip by 5 students. One was kicking him, another was punching him in the stomach, while another hit him in the face, and 2 were holding him under. The school said nobody had seen this happen, so nothing could be done, even though he had the marks on his body. He had a kid put a knife against his stomach, and the kid said he was going to cut his guts out. The day he took his life, it was a substitute first period band teacher that bullied him in front of the entire class. Throughout the entire day, he was bullied even more because of that teacher. The principal knew about it, and nobody from the school called and told us what had happened. He had told several others that it would be all over 2 hours after school. No one called or texted us to let us know. I picked him up at 3:15, and exactly 5:15, he was pronounced dead. We went after the schools and district, but nothing happened. I asked them for all of his school records, and when we got them, every incident that took place was wiped out of his files, except for silly little things that happened in the 1st and 2nd grade. This school bullying is not handled the way it should be. I'm praying something can happen out of your going up against them. Later, she sent me another message saying, it is really sad that schools and school districts do not take care of our children. They prefer to push the problems under the rugs and pretend like they never happened. We moved to Utah from Fallen, Nevada. My oldest son was 11 and my youngest son was 3. I have never seen bullying before. The worst we had ever seen was girls fighting over boys and vice versa. My oldest son was bullied also. He had a knife put to his throat by 3 other kids. And when we called the cops on them, they said they were just joking and I told them that if they ever came near my son again, they would be charged with attempted murder. They never came near him again, but he was bullied a lot by a lot of other kids. After his little brother took his own life, he told me he had attempted suicide 3 times in high school because of the bullying. I had no idea, and of course it made me cry because it makes us parents feel like we are failing our children. Anyways, we have no problem going against the school or school district. I don't know why parents are so afraid of going up against the schools because it's their right. Don't give up. For every parent that speaks up, it helps other 5 or more students. I know I am there with you. So as I mentioned the first time I came before you, this started when my son was attacked, and many parents have reached out to me since. Let me know their stories with hope that I would bring them to the attention of those who do something about it. In trying to help these families, I have been their voice on the news media, social media, and the Canyon School Board meetings. And the only ones that haven't offered any sympathy to those families or response to any help and hopefully resolve the situation is the same people who have the ability to make the change. And that's all of you on the board in front of me now. Not a single one of you has tried to reach out to me to try and find a way to make things better for these poor families, or even acknowledge that there's a problem that needs to be fixed. Because of that, I realize that those who should be caring for our kids, including all of you before me tonight, don't really care about them or what happens to them. If any more physical injuries or deaths happen to any more students in the Canyon School District, it's on all your heads. I can't waste my time coming before a group of people who have no intent to make things better and safer for our kids. So I'm taking my focus elsewhere to help make that change happen. I intend to do what I can to make things better for our kids. And I will reiterate what I said the first time I came before you. My name is Spencer Mears. I will not hide. I will not be silenced. I will not be bullied.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And I will now ask for a motion, and please read every item on that agenda.
I will make that motion. I move that we approve the items listed on the consent agenda, which are approval of minutes for June 6th, 2023, approval of purchasing bids, approval of student overnight travel, approval of hire and termination reports, approval of May financial reports, approval of mental health screening program, approval of land trust and TSSP amendment for Indian Hills Middle School.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion to the motion? Okay, seeing none, I will now call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll now go on to new business, and the item is item A, strategic plan initiatives and board indicators, and Dr. Rick Robbins, superintendent, will present.
First off, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just, I know these are hard things, and just on behalf of the board, I'd love to meet with you. It's hard to hear that, but you know, it's an issue that we can improve on, obviously. So I know the board would, they will listen to you, and so I'm just extending that invitation. You're welcome to come in and meet with me. So awesome. Okay, Cindy, you'll hear from Cindy to get that set up. All right. But thanks for being here. Appreciate you, Cindy. Okay, let's talk about indicators. So, first off, just want to thank, board members and everybody that's participated in this. It kind of neat to see this plan come to fruition and, unfold, in the district. As you all know, we've spent a lot of time on this going clear back to pretty much middle of the pandemic, I guess, is when we really started to create a plan, to implement a new not new strategic plan, but more of a yes and with our current strategic plan and vision. And so it's exciting to see this phase. I'm so pleased with all the great work that you've done with administration and with faculty and staff and parents in collaborating around moving this forward. So it's just exciting to see this unfold. So we'll talk a little bit more about it. Our tenants, as you know, still remain the bedrock of the district, and those are listed there. I think we're all very familiar with those. As I've mentioned before, what's come from that, and it's a real tribute to all of you, is in the beginning, not just creating a strategic plan, but creating measurements and indicators that would really be the district and the board's way of providing a return on investment to patrons and to taxpayers and to parents. And interestingly, we're one of the only districts that actually do indicators that go along with and measure success or not on our strategic vision and plan in the state. So that's a tribute to all of you and the district over the years to make that happen. So through the pandemic, I think one thing that we learned was that the environment changed, the economy changed, our student demographics have changed, our needs have changed. And so that really was the impetus and the premise for those early conversations about, what might it look like when it comes to measuring success in the future. And we know that during the pandemic, there was learning loss. And so we've kind of had to do a reset. Having said that, as you all know, it's well documented. Utah is the leading state in the country when it comes to recovery with learning loss, and Canyons is at the top or near the top in the state of Utah. So not to rehash that, but I think, we're all proud of our efforts to continue to keep school open and engage our kids and provide an education that they so well deserve. So out of that, some next steps that came from that, these 4 focus areas developed. So I kind of see this as really the operating systems for the tenants. The tenants are their very foundational, principle-based, aspirational 30,000-foot view bedrock to the strategic vision. But we really needed to develop a way to maybe operationalize those tenants a little bit better with a little more clarity, maybe addressing some needs that came out of the pandemic, moving the district forward. And so those 4 focus areas emerged through all of that input and stakeholder input that we received during that time when we were revisiting the strategic plan. As we met as an indicator committee and just kind of digesting all of that information and trying to condense that down, there's a few items, and I'm happy to talk through this and take any questions. The first one that I want to highlight there is that I would recommend that we continue with an annual indicator report, and that indicator report would be every December, and that lines up with what we've done in the past. And so we would continue to maintain all of those current indicators that we currently report on. So when it comes to achievement, we still have graduation rate, ACT, and we'll look through these, but ACT report, proficiency and proficiency through end of level testing. And then you can also see in the achievement area, there are a couple other recommendations that came out of that committee that we would look at. One is an annual report on attendance. We know that through the pandemic and now up to a third of our students are still chronically absent, defined by about 20% missing school is what the definition would be. So we want to continually look at that. And then early learning literacy. So we know the importance of K through or pre-K through third grade, and just how important it is for kids to be proficient in reading. And as a state, we have a lot of room to grow, right? For the most part, we're between 60 and 70% literate, proficient literate by third grade. Since that time, full day kindergarten has been implemented. I think we know states that have done this, that's just been huge in improving outcomes for literacy. We do have a little bit of a curveball that's new to share with you tonight. The state is moving away from reading inventory and math inventory, which has long been that data set that has been amazing to provide that information. Frankly, I'm not sure where they're headed with this, but that really throws a wrench into this plan. So we'll be at superintendent meetings the rest of the week. I'm sure I'll hear more about that, but we'll see, what happens with that, but a little bit of a concern there. And then we've also added the recommendation for grading distribution. As we know, during the pandemic, especially our 9th and 10th graders at that time, so they're now sophomores and juniors, we had massive fail rates in that group of students that we're very concerned about, and that we're really trying to get those students caught up. But that could have an impact on our graduation rate as well, trying to get those students back up to speed. With that, I think the one thing that we've added there is innovations, and we're kind of in this space. It's exciting with adopting Mastery Connect, where I think we really can hone in on grading practices as it relates to mastery and how we can support our students better. I think that will pay dividends, but I also think thinking about our Skyward contract and looking at cumulative and how that may be an innovation that will really improve outcomes. It'll be interesting to see how these things kind of coalesce and end up integrating with each other. But hopefully, as we go forward, we'll be able to innovate with grading in a way that really improves not just grades, but really improves kids' skill sets and their ability to actually master the content and skills that they need to go forward. So those would be additions to our current indicators, and then we would still move forward with the others, and I'll talk a little bit to those. So here's just a few things with graduation. You can see there, as I mentioned, proficiency, ACT graduation, just a few highlights that we're proud of. I think it's been mentioned before. We've had in many years, including recent years, the top academic achieving schools at elementary, middle, and high school all reside in Canyons, and that's not by accident. That's by design, and that's something that we should be very proud of, and something we want to continue to work toward. Innovations. Here's just a few that over the last few years. I think this is something in the current strategic vision that we wanted to update. So here's just a few innovations that in recent years that we've been working on. But as you know, there's still a lot ahead of us that we're looking at. Community engagement in this area, one of the things that has been very important to us has been volunteerism. That's something that we've measured along with PTA engagement. And I've said this many, many times. I don't take this for granted for 1 minute. The level of support we get from our volunteers and our PTA. If you remember, toward the end of the pandemic, one of the things that really sticks out to me was coming out of the pandemic, just kind of the fear that people had about coming back to school. And we actually put a call out to our parents and our volunteers and our PTA to re-engage that we needed their support. And, they responded and they came to our aid and have since. And it's a joy to meet with our volunteers and our PTA. Every time I get that opportunity, I'm just re-energized with hope that, everything is going to be okay, that, you know, our parents and our community and our volunteers are there for us as they have been from the beginning. And then just a few others, our canyoneering nights are amazing and just a terrific opportunity for our parents. And then all of our ongoing relationships that we have. One thing that I think is new that we'd like to suggest, and I actually think Andrew suggested this, is that, you know, maybe doing a little more with tracking our SEC participation on the school side and on the parent side, and making that part of our annual report in December. I think that would be helpful, and it would also hold us accountable to that. That, you know, I think for the most part, we do track that, and it is a priority in the district, but taking that to another level with our annual indicator report, I think, you know, just steps that up a bit, and I think that'd be terrific. So that's something that is on the table. And then in customer service, as we've talked about, our implementation of Parent Square, including it as a sole communication tool with our extracurricular programs. So far, what I've heard, nothing but positive about Parent Square and all of its abilities and attributes and things that it provides to parents. We've also talked about website redesign. If you know, I'm just amazed every time I visit our website how impressive it is, and information that's there, and just how much it really does highlight our students and provides easy access for the public and for parents to access what they need. And then continuing just our correspondence with the community, and we can talk about this later, it was mentioned, but continuing to do more with listening tours and engaging with our communities and our parents and our patrons. And then finally, fiscal accountability. So looking at, once again, bond rating, that's something that we're very proud of. AAA bond rating that I think the district, if I understand right, always has been correctly on. And that's not always easy. I've been in other places where that is just a dream. And so the fact that Canyons has always had that AAA rating just says a lot about our portfolio and, you know, our ability to do that. And then compliance and other things that we've looked at and Leon has reported on, I think we would continue to do that. So you can see a few things there. I want to just mention then, you know, that would be kind of on the tenant report side, going back to the focus areas. So what I would recommend, and I this is what I've been hearing from the board, and I thoroughly agree, is that meeting monthly has been a really a positive thing. And you know, one, I see the level of engagement between the board and administration and really moving those focus areas forward, and just some great productive discussions that have come out of that have really sparked a lot of engagement. And frankly, the board has acted on many of those action items that have come through that. And it's just, I think it's been a great flow of work to see, you know, different ideas and innovations come through a committee, and then, you know, within a month or so, it's in front of the full board for discussion. And then we've been able to have a discussion, and the board's approved it. And it's really, you know, a grassroots level that's involved the board from the beginning. And Mastery Connect's a good example of that, just on the top of my head, of one that's come through that's been great. Also our Portrait of the Scholar, that's been, you know, some fantastic work of really helping to create and further that North Star discussion and guiding the district's decisions. So I would foresee that and recommend that we continue to meet on a monthly basis. And then those four focus area leads would continue to report to the board at your request, and that would be your purview. That may be, you know, biannually or quarterly. We sort of have it in a rotation right now. If you want to just continue to do it that way, I think that's great. A few things that I wanted to highlight, and these are supplemental, and we had discussion about whether or not these should be indicators. I think, as you know, the more indicators we get, it kind of becomes that scenario of jack of all trades, master of none. that kind of gets us, maybe in a place where there's too many. And not to say that some of these items might be some things that strategically in the future you include as indicators. But right now, these would be supplemental. So in high quality learning, we're focused on PLC implementation, as you know, Portrait of a Scholar. They've also been working on differentiated diploma, leadership. One big one that we're focused on right now is engaged classrooms, and all these are aligned with strategic vision. Specifically in engaged classrooms, really looking at project-based learning, STEM and STEAM, arts integration, just trying to, really get our students back to project-based learning where they're not so focused on technology, but really that hands-on experience. And then also a discussion about what the future might be around competency-based or mastery-based systems. In access and opportunity, as you know, this has been, and Wendy did a fantastic job of really increasing parent and family engagement. That was something that's been a focus in that committee in their area. Also looking at specific student needs and student populations through our PLC work and BLT work. A few things just as a reminder for those of you that serve it, what we've been focusing on is, and this would be supplemental data that we would continue to report on, but by demographic information, we would look at AP participation, concurrent enrollment, CTE, extracurricular, special education, just to name a few. So really kind of getting at a more granular level at student access across the district and equity. So I think that group's done well. We've also looked at middle school acceleration, what that might look like. If you remember the last board meeting, Wendy talked about the AP program in middle schools. And I actually, from what I've gathered and learned about that may be the answer as we really sought out what acceleration or enriched opportunities for middle school students might be. And then Brian has done a fantastic job leading our human-centered supports. As you know, a big focus there has been student and employee wellness, and that's included Thrive Time. And so we're continuing to revisit Thrive Time and to improve and refine what Thrive Time looks like and how it can impact our students' behavior. And so it wouldn't be an indicator, but we would continually report on office referrals and attendance issues, culture and climate. We would also look at Safe UT reports, as well as any other surveys that we've done. Sharp surveys, another one that we may want to look at that, but really focusing in on wellness. And then also that might include teen centers. That's another initiative that we brought forward, but also employee wellness. We've done a lot to really understand the wellness and mental health issues with our employees. And I think Brian and this team have done an excellent job of really honing in on some of those issues. And we've heard that through the listening tour, trying to make mental health more accessible to our employees and more readily available, as well as physical needs with opening up our middle schools and their gym areas for employees to access. And then finally, operations. Leon's done an amazing job with our operations team and our communications, our external relations department also involved there, where we've really honed in on our communication plan and really trying to clarify and address roles in the district. Operations has also taken up our school safety. Just much appreciation to those on the board that serve on our EMT committee. That group has been very, very active over the last year in making recommendations to upgrade our safety systems throughout the district, and many of those have come to fruition. This is also the place where we've really looked at student enrollment and thinking about our trends. And you guys, board has heard this before, but we've talked a lot about birth rates and the economy and cost of living and some of those things that are impacting our students and why they're leaving and why they're coming to us, so we can better understand that, so that we can recruit students to Canyon School District. And then Lastly, in operations, it's been just a very robust discussion around recruiting and retention for teachers and employees. I think, as we know, it's so competitive in this environment right now, and we're head to head with other districts and other employers fighting for the best that we can. And to see us continue to address, not just compensation, which I think we've remained very, very competitive, even in the midst of budget contraction. We've been able to provide substantial increases in COLA to our employees, not to mention that $15 an hour minimum for our classified employees, I think, is just a terrific attribute to the district. So Leon's done a fantastic job of leading that committee, and those of you that serve there, much appreciation to you as well as we work on those issues. So it's very comprehensive. I don't see a lot of holes or gaps in the issues and the areas of need that we're continuing to address. To be quite honest, when we first approved the strategic vision, I kind of wondered in my mind, like, is it so comprehensive that it's going to be too much? But really, as we've got into it, I think those committees and that work has been very thorough and very targeted. And it really has kind of, brought to light what the priorities are. And we've been able to work on those and see those, happen and see those things operationalize. And it's been great to see all that, kind of come together. So I'm very, very proud of that. So with that, questions or thoughts? President.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. So board, are there any questions or comments? Mrs. Nybar?
Thank you for this presentation, and I enjoyed participating with that meeting with the indicators committee. Really like what you, a few slides back, talking about reaching out to teachers. I know we talked about surveying what they're currently doing for project-based and engaged learning to help inform the indicators committee. And that review of what they're doing helps us assess what types of high quality learning is happening in the classroom. One thing under community engagement, I know when we met, our committee talked about this, and I didn't see it implemented there, but we talked about also looking at the attendance of the community and parents at fun runs, sporting events, concerts, and those types of things. And I know Wendy Dow had talked about how we could easily do that and get those numbers, because that's a great indicator as far as how well we're engaging the community and making our schools the epicenter for the neighborhood and the community. And so I was just wanting to make sure that that's going to be something under community engagement. We talked about it, but I didn't see it listed up here.
Yeah, I'll add that to access and opportunity. That lead would be the one that would report. Are you asking for that as an indicator in the December meeting?
Yeah, in our meeting, we talked about including that as an indicator for community engagement with the indicator committee, because it's something we can easily get, but it helps us see, because right now we discussed how a lot of times currently the community engagement piece is centered around, okay, volunteers in the classroom or in the schools or attending the canyoneering. But we talked about these other programs we have that really elicit a lot of interaction with the community regarding all of the things they can attend, whether it's the elementary fun runs or carnivals or art nights or, concerts or games, and that would be a good level of engagement. And I think Wendy and someone else talked about the relationship with that as far as parents' connection to the school and how we can outreach to maybe families that maybe aren't currently taking advantage of that have, language barriers and things like that.
Yeah, no, I remember we did talk about it at some level. And I think to your point, Holly, some things are much easier to record than others.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess from the full board, just give me some direction on, I mean, because we could use, for example, like a clicker on certain events, right?
Mhm.
But there's other events that there's so many people coming and going, the administrative
Mhm.
labor to even try to track that would be difficult. So maybe within access and opportunity, if you guys can clarify exactly like what event, because I agree, like canyoneering, that would be really helpful information to know how many parents came and from what schools, or
Mhm.
just so we have some idea about, where we can improve to advertise or whatnot. But
Mhm.
I do remember this conversation with cabinet, and some of the questions were like, well, where do we start and end, and with what? Like, because there are events that are a lot easier to track than others.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
So can I ask a clarifying question?
Mhm.
So do you mean counting how many people attend something, or actually counting just how many events are put on that the community can attend? Like, are you talking both of those?
That's a really good question. We hadn't talked about how many events per school, but we had talked about what's the level of participation. And I know Wendy had talked about in some Title I schools that they have been doing clickers even for events like a fun run to know what type of involvement they're getting. And she talked about how it could be pretty easy to track. And then of course we have events that you have to get tickets for, so we can see what that is like. Even our plays, our some of our sporting events where there's tickets. And just and then there was some discussion about drawing families in that may not generally participate as often, and what that can do as far as an indicator for their level of engagement with the school as a whole.
Okay, I mean, I kind of agree with superintendent that maybe that committee can work on it a little more and come up with some specifics. Yeah, Mrs. Teeny.
Yeah, so just and I just went back and looked at my notes on that one, and I actually had it down as kind of a piece of a larger idea of finding a metric to measure. I wrote down official touch points between school and home.
Yeah.
And that was one of the ones, and then also home visits and SCC training, as well as attendance at SCC meetings, field trips and things like that. And so, yeah, as I recall, we kind of talked about it, but then the administration was going to maybe try and make it a little more practical or feasible to come up with a metric of a touch point between home and school.
We can certainly work on that and adjust and come back and report. So
That'd be awesome.
Okay.
I'm excited to see that.
awesome.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Mrs. Oaks?
Thanks, Rick. It's fun to see this all kind of come together as a synopsis of what we've all been experiencing as board members alongside the staff. But I think it's cool for the public to see what we've been working on. I love that we're going to continue having regular meetings and keep generating ideas and working together. I think it's a really fun way to see the legs of the strategic plan get up and running. So thanks.
Okay, Mrs. Tingy?
Another thought too, we talked about how, I mean, it's easy to get excited about measuring tons and tons of stuff. Like you said, jack of many trades, master of none. But we also talked about how certain of these things that are good to measure may not necessarily need to be a board adopted indicator, because what they're stepping stones to whatever that higher level, that peak indicator would be. And so that's kind of a difficult thing to balance. So like if graduation rate is kind of that peak of the indicator that we've chosen to track, well, what are some of the things that feed into a successful improvement in that indicator? Well, they might be other actions or activities or things that we will measure, but not necessarily be a board adopted indicator. So kind of two tiers of of indicators and measurements.
Yeah, and just to your point, Nancy, this comes to mind as an example. And I think you're right, like how those all correlate and support each other, and they scaffold up to those most high level, high yield outcomes, right? And with graduation, attendance one, right? Students attending school has obviously a big impact, but one that we've talked about I think was in access and opportunity is, for example, is the relationship between some of our student populations and their enrollment in a CTE pathway, whether it's a SPED or a multi-language learner, when they're enrolled in two pathways and they're consistent and they complete, the graduation rate goes way up versus if they're just taking a CTE course that's isolated and it's not within a pathway, because they obviously can see a future in a job or whatnot. And so I think as in our subcommittees, as we meet, to your point, really pointing to those high leverage, high yield indicators. And we should ask ourselves that, right? In those subcommittees and in our focus areas, if it's not really supporting the overall vision of the district and the move forward, then is it something that we really, should focus on? Another example would be, looking at classroom engagement and how that is directly impacted by our portrait of a scholar, right? When you're thinking about collaboration and how our students work together in project-based learning, those all are integrated in overall success. So I think just having that conversation and asking ourselves, why is this really something that is going to support those high yield indicators and the alignment with the strategic vision or not? If it's not, then let's not waste our time on some of those and maybe, make decisions to maybe adjust our resources to target those things that do have more impact. So I appreciate that comment.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, Karen.
Mine's not so much a question as a statement. I just want our community to understand that when they come to us, I guess I'm a little irritated. When they come to us with concerns and share with us, we value that information, but they don't always see where that information goes. And I wanted them to understand that these 4 areas cover pretty close to everything that happens in the district in one way or another. And that when those issues come up, we do take them to our groups, to those committees, and we discuss ways that those can be improved. It is not a one and done deal fix. We have to make sure that all students have their rights protected. So, for instance, the bullying issue that we hear repeatedly about. Yes, we're aware of it and we're very concerned about it, and we don't agree that it should be in our classrooms. Are there ways we can fix that? Yes. Are there things we've discussed that we can put into place? Yes. Can it be done today? No. It is a process, and unless they can come with an idea that they think they could add to our discussion, bringing the amount of the drama to it every single time does not necessarily move that issue. We hear it, we understand it, but I think that allowing us to go through and having this particular format of being able to address these issues. I happen to be on human-centered supports, and that's where discipline comes in. Yes, we're fully aware. Is it a difficult, complex problem? Yes. Are we ignoring it? Absolutely not. And if they have a personal concern, then we have steps that they can have that personal concern addressed. And they need not be anonymous. Come and talk to us. We want to hear. There's not a member of the board, there's not a member of your cabinet that would not sit down with a person or email back and forth with a person if they are honestly wanting to give some information. But I just wanted the community to understand that, yeah, we do hear you. We can't comment on it in board meeting, but that's why we have these strategic focus areas, so that when those issues come up, we have a place to take it. There is a system and there is a way that we will address it. So I want them to feel comfortable knowing that we're not ignoring it. And yeah, it's a big problem. Is it just a Canyons District problem? No, particularly the discipline happening in our schools. We know it's a nationwide issue. We are not just little old canyons going to solve this all by ourselves. But as educators, can we make it the best we can in canyons? Absolutely. Can we improve? Always. But I just wanted to make that statement. Sorry to get on a soapbox. But I just wanted people to understand that just because we didn't call you that minute or talk to you individually right off, that it didn't trigger a process that's already in motion. Yes, our communication should be a little more a quicker feedback loop. But if we're not getting back to you, then come to us individually, where we can actually have a conversation. Board meetings bring up issues, but they are not conversations. Anyway, thank you for the work that you're doing. This presentation has been fantastic. I'm so excited by the direction I see the district going in. So thank you, Rick, and thank you for sharing this.
Thank you for your comments, Karen.
Okay, so thank you, Rick. This is great. I really love our indicators, and I like the idea of expanding them a little bit. My question to the board is, do we want to set goals? So when we originally had the indicators, we actually had, is it a 5-year target? We had a 3 and a 5-year target. So do we want, so, and that kind of then like we were supposed to be redoing them, and then COVID hit, and then we hired Rick, and well, vice versa. What anyway? So we hired Rick, then COVID. No, I was just kidding. Anyway, sorry. Sorry. It's all your fault. Anyway, just kidding. So do we want to set goals again? And I mean, if we do, I would ask, I mean, I think we should have that committee continue to work and bring them back to us. I mean, I like having a goal. Like, for instance, I think our graduation rate was, I don't know, 88 or something, or 86. I don't know. It was low. And then we set the goal for it to be 90 in 5 years, and we actually met that. So, I mean, I think I personally think it's a good thing to have the goals. But I don't know how the rest of you feel. And did you guys talk about that as a committee?
Yeah, we didn't really talk about that part of it, but I agree. I think some measures, a target goal doesn't really help the conversation, but others it does. So I think we need to be careful in distinguishing the difference of things, because like even before, we didn't really have measures on all of them. We had measures on more of the academic ones, but so things like website page views. You can't really set a goal because that is an indication. It's more of an indicator of what's happening at the time. And so I think we would, want to maybe not set a target for everything, but look at numbers and look at some of the things that we could set
Some of the targets.
reasonable
Yeah.
targets for. And last time we consulted a lot with the administration and even school principals on what they felt were realistic goals and targets. And I'll have to say, I'm kind of disheartened about if USBE is moving away from reading and math inventory, because that has been an indicator that's had some consistency for us. That is, I think, focusing on that has helped move the dial to where we are now. Do you think they'll substitute it with another platform and we start all over with the new baseline? Or
We'll find out hopefully in the next couple of days. I know other superintendents, we've been talking about how concerned, and I don't know if it's this whole wave of energy with letters and trying to, reimagine literacy in the state. I mean, nobody's happy with the fact that, a third of our students are not at grade level by third grade, right? And that's a nationwide issue. But going away from reading inventory and math inventory, where that has been rock solid data that's informed boards' decisions in just about every district. I just don't have enough information to tell you good or bad. And maybe, before the weekend, I'll have a better idea. So.
Okay, so board Andrew? And then I'll ask the board question.
So I just wanted to say that while I wholeheartedly think that we should have goals as a district, I think indicators are inherently goalless. They show us what's happening so that we can get a good feeling as to if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing to meet our goals. But the indicators themselves, I would say, are not necessarily goal indicated themselves, if that makes sense.
Okay. Anyone else? Mrs. Nybar.
I think with President Schill talking about setting goals, when we look at the direction that the strategic plan is taking, and when we look at indicators, and I believe the genesis behind reviewing the indicators was to be sure that the direction the district's heading very much supports what we've just canonized with the strategic plan, and that and the implementation is happening. And so the idea of President Schill talking about goals, although I do agree they're separate from indicators, and indicators tell us a different story than goals. Goals help us ensure that the implementation is happening. I know one thing we also talked about during that indicator committee is I was really interested as far as when we're looking at our indicators that we can kind of draw a line to the indicators that we have, and they're all reflecting back on those 4 strategic plan areas, because that's the indication that yes, we're moving in that direction. With high quality learning, if we have curriculum maps showing that engaged student learning is happening and that there's a percentage of classroom experiences that are project based, that's an indicator that we are implementing what we are talking about in our impact statements. So I do feel that these indicators should be a little nuanced and a little different from what was first set out, because this strategic plan, if working effectively, should make an impact and difference in what we're gauging as far as our indicators are, and as far as the goals of the district. So whether it be separate with goals or with indicators, I am really interested in making sure that we have some indicators demonstrating here's our curriculum maps, engaged learning is happening, project-based learning, hands-on learning. These things we see it there and we know that it's happening. And I think that will then tie to the other indicator with school attendance, so student attendance. So
Okay, thank you. Good comments, board. Mr. Millerberg.
Rick, with regard to goals, there's the old saying that a goal without a plan is a dream. But the thing is we have a plan. So we ought to have a goal. Because to me, if you don't have a goal, it's like going nowhere, and you never know when you get there. So if we set achievable goals and we work towards them, use the plan that we now have, I think it just makes it sense.
I appreciate all the comments. I definitely, I think in those working committees, we can flesh that out. The thinking about the academic, goals, as you recall, and I think through a few different presentations, this was alluded to, but the state changed the formula and the cut scores when they set those proficiency rates. And so we're kind of in that space where we don't really have a lot of longitudinal data to say, okay, is it 5%? Is it 10%? What do we set it at? So I think having those conversations now that I think there's agreement in moving this forward, that would be great. I think it's important we get Hal and Laura and some of our people that deal more in the metrics of how goals work and what is achievable and what we can do in relation to how that looks with the state and how those formulas are developed. I just want us to be informed, right, to fully understand like what we're committing to, so that when we report on it, we can actually articulate and speak to what that growth meant versus just choosing a percentage that we don't really know what it means. And so, yeah, I think that's a great plan of action, and I think we can get those set, going into the school year for sure, have those ready to go.
Okay, so, can that indicator, so do you think that indicator committee can work on that? Or do you think the different focus groups should look at that? Who do you
Well,
think should work on it?
My thought would be just the smaller groups, the better. I think we've set in a larger picture the vision, but in each of those committees, maybe break it down kind of where they fall and have those committees start to take that question up that'd be my recommendation, but we can certainly pull the full group back together if you'd rather.
Well, I just meant that the indicator committee of just the 3 board members, and I don't know who else. But there was a lot of people. Okay.
There were 3 board members and then a lot of administrators representing
Okay.
the different
So
focus groups.
we'll do what you recommend then. Just you lead out on that, I would say.
We would assign indicators to the subcommittees and it may cross over. I could easily see some, overlapping, but then working on some recommendations to bring to the full board at least before school starts. I think we could get those established.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
That work. Okay.
Okay, is there anything else? Anyone? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. This is really great to see all this come together. I'm really excited about it. Okay, so the next is staff comments. Superintendent, do you have anything you want to report? Anything else? Okay, then Mr. Wilcox, Business Administrator.
I think you've heard from me enough tonight too, so, no. No comments.
Okay, wow, we're going fast now. Okay, so board, this is the time. We did kind of postpone NSBA report, so if you want to report on anything from NSBA or just give your regular board report, that would be great. And it's Mrs. Pedersen's turn to start.
I knew it was my end, my turn. USBA was a fascinating meeting. They have so much information and so little time for us to really get to it all. So it was very, very difficult to be able to choose what I wanted to get into. I was pleased, and we've mentioned this before, that some of the classes that I attended verified how well Canyons District is doing in implementing some of these ideas that other districts are coming up with as well. I went to one about increasing student voice with a student advisory council. Check, we've got that. We also, the one thing that was interesting is that the only difference between what we do and they do is that this particular district rotated the meetings to each of the high schools. So the board moved and some of the students. So I don't know, that could be very complicated, but I found it was interesting, and they provided a bus. So I thought, well, that's interesting. We could look into that. I went to one about dress code policy, and it's was framed as a tool for enhancing gender equity. And it's true, most of the dress code policies always seem to penalize women's wear. Guys don't really have the difficulties that females do at length of things and what's showing and what's not showing. I do think we need to look at possibly strengthening our dress code just a little bit. Ours is pretty open. We're not going to have any challenges with it. But I have had parents come up to me that they're just aghast at what they see kids wearing to school. They'll be dropping off a student, or they're coming through the building and they go, kids can wear that to school. And I think it reflects poorly on the district. I don't think we need to look like Sterling scholars all the time, you know what I mean? Ties and suits and all that, but we may want to make ourselves a little more professional. Kids tend to, I know when I was in elementary, when we had kids dress up to go to the symphony, the behavior was 110% different than when they wore regular clothes to the same event. Just having to change your attire changes your perspective. So something to look at. I thought another interesting one is I went to one about retaining teachers in a competitive market. And I thought what was really interesting that they built in planning days for teachers every 3 weeks consistently through the year. So there was one every single month. And we can look into that in a little more detail online. But the one that just kind of shocked me is that they shifted the Christmas break to have more time after New Year's, so that they could do some of those planning times. So they didn't go out quite so soon as if we go out really soon, but they saved some time and they went a little longer in January so that they could have some meetings with the teachers right at the very beginning. I thought, oh, I hadn't really thought about stretching that Christmas break just a teeny little bit. I went to one about homegrown programs. We've been looking into having ways to get our students getting into the education field. We've looked at, there was one where they talked about teacher daycare. We've talked about that as well as in the wellness committee as a possibility. We're also talking about having a wellness clinic, which I think is a very valuable thing to look at. And they were emphasizing, as well as we have been, really looking at having maker spaces in elementary, as well as in middle school and high school. And of course, my favorite one was AI. And I still think at some point we need to have a policy on AI, but I don't think we know enough or have it being used enough as an educational tool in the district to know how we need to guide that. So I'm continuing my research in that particular area. And the last and only thing I want to say is that just before school got out, I had an opportunity to go meet with the ASL, the alternate language people. And they shared with me, because I used to be one of their ESL people in the school, shared with me what they're doing to improve the progress and growth of our ESL speakers, our second language speakers. And I was so impressed at the improvement of data keeping and record keeping. And a lot of things are being generated on the computer now. So it's right there for the teachers. And they're not having to create and find and fill in their own information. So I am pleased to report that what's happening is really, really great. And today I had an update from WIDA, which is the test that they give to English speakers to prove their growth. And that's even improved immensely, that the information is going to be so much more valuable. So we are making good inroads in that particular area, because I know that's one of our low scoring parts of our district. So anyway, I'm pleased to report that I see great things coming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Tingy.
Okay, I wasn't kidding when I have 3 pages. And those are just the highlights that I pulled out of 10 times that many pages of notes. So I'll try and be quick. It was a great conference. I also attended one about improving student voice. And one of the takeaways from there that I thought was great is their district student advisory council, which sounded very similar to how ours is structured, each year organizes what they call a Care to the Core Day. And it's a day of service that is coordinated by the students throughout the district. And they talked about how more than just listening to students' perspective, that you need to help engage them and partner with them on activities and let them help advocate and be a change. There's one on eliminating a graduation gap, and it was pretty impressive, the work that they did. But one of the takeaways on that one is they mentioned that they switched to a standards-based grading, and it helps students to be more engaged and to improve their attendance at school, which I mean, they had double-digit graduation rate improvement in the course of 2 or 3 years. And then one on governing with policy. And a couple of takeaways on that is policy is a way of making decisions in advance. And also, they suggested that with each policy, as we discuss it, ask, how does this policy help students succeed? Just keep that in mind, that that's the reason we have policies. There's one, I went to one on effective boardsmanship. And I thought this was an interesting perspective. The board looks up and out, and the superintendent looks down and in. And that was kind of a visual for me to kind of separate what our different roles are. And then they reminded us that 70% of taxpayers don't have kids in the schools. So we need to remember that and bring them into the conversation. And then this was another thing that I thought was pretty interesting. They said often we refer to the public education system, but really what it is it's a system of public schools. And I thought that was good, a good point too. One on personal learning, and they said listening is not engaging. And so you need to identify what motivates the students, and that in their district, they moved from 70% lecture and 30% doing to 30% lecture and 70% doing in their classroom. So I know we've talked a lot about more hands-on and things like that. One of them was another workshop I went to was parental rights, and it was given by the Oregon School Boards Association, which afterwards I connected with one of the presenters who is a former teacher at Brighton High School before he went to law school and got a job there. So anyway, they just kind of talked about some of the things that they've identified about parental rights to have access to their student records, access to curriculum. And as we're looking to adopt curriculum, I know it's one of our practices and it's a good practice to have access to those texts available to parents. And they said if there's not an online access, that what they do, what they recommend is placing a copy of the book at the local public library, because that library is open after hours when school and the district office is not, like weekends and things like that. And then there are a couple other things. Another one was on maximizing the PK through second grade years for a third through sixth grade achievement. So again, it's kind of that early intervention. And they talked about how their kindergarten classes get a big banner that says class of whatever year, similar to what we do, but that every year that banner ceremoniously moves with the students to their next grade hall, and it's posted up there all the time as a reminder that they are the class of, whatever year. And then finally, the last one is what's called Challenging Goliath, and it's a small, highly impacted district in Colorado that was, their schools were continually in the turnaround status, and to the point where the state was ready to take them over. And so they're fighting that, and it looks like they're going to, be able to be successful. But they made the comment that the bottom of the pile is always the fault of the adults and never the children. And I think that's something that we should keep in mind as we look at some of the places that we can have improvement, that we as the adults ought to be able to find some solutions for improvement.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Millerberg.
No, I apologize that I was not at our last board meeting. The time you guys were sitting here in nice air conditioning, enjoying yourself, I was out on the streets of Washington, D.C., walking around the town with 4 of my grandchildren. We started at Lafayette Park and walked over to Ford Theater and went on a Lincoln assassination tour, which was absolutely amazing. And I'm sure for four little boys 11, 12, and 13. It was a great education experience for them. As far as, well, being I missed the last meeting, I didn't get to mention anything about graduation, which the two graduations I attended were both, I thought, very, very well done. The first, I had the opportunity to speak to the young people transitioning from Jordan Valley. That to me is always a very, very heart-wrenching experience to be there. I look at the Jordan Valley School as hallowed ground. It is one of the most special places we have in our district. And so for me, when I have the opportunity to speak at Jordan Valley graduation, it is always a highlight for the year. I also had the opportunity to speak at the Hillcrest graduation. And I just have to give a shout out to the young people that were there. I did not see a single student that was not appropriately dressed. They all looked very, very nice, and they conducted themselves exceedingly well. Also have to give a shout out to Principal Levitt. I am just always amazed that he takes the time, and as part of his graduation speech, he stands up and he sings a number from the high school musical. I said, Greg, I'd rather take a bullet than do that. That would scare me to death. And back to the NSBA conference, I am just going to reiterate what I said before. And we will refer to these as the 3 F-ups, okay? When you foul up, fess up so that you can fix up. The other thing that came out of that class, as I mentioned before, you need to be able to write your own story. Jeff, I am so glad that we have you and Kirsten here to keep our story written. Because as they said, if you don't write your own story, the media will write it for you, and you probably won't like what they write. So that's all I have for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Oakes. And also board members, if you didn't attend NSBA, you can talk about any education conference you've been to or ideas you have for the board.
That would be me this year. It was the first year I wasn't able to attend NSBA, which I really missed being able to go with you guys. But yeah, a couple weeks ago, I got to attend the BYU Arts Express conference, which focuses on arts integration in K-6 classrooms. It was amazing. I've gone several times before, but it just seems to get better and better every year. And we did have some of our teachers there this year, particularly our BTS teachers, or Beverly Taylor Sorensen teachers, and it was wonderful. One of the speakers there was from Harvard's Project Zero, which is associated with Howard Gardner, which I don't know if any of you guys recognize his name. He is the one who actually was the mind behind the research and writing on multiple intelligences. And Harvard's Project Zero focuses, its mission is to understand and nurture human potential, such as learning, thinking, ethics, intelligence, and creativity. And it began with a focus on understanding in and through the arts. And it's what the term visible thinking, deep thinking is all connected to this research, this body of research. And the speaker that was up there took us through some exercises that are similar to some of the things that they've researched, and really showed you from the inside out how the arts can make a profound difference, and you can go really deep. One of the things that Project Zero focuses on is learning through play. That how important that is for very young children in particular. And it was fascinating. And I feel like I barely scratched the surface of understanding what there was to offer there. But it made me really excited because it dovetailed so much with what we've talked about in high quality learning and with our portrait of a Canyon scholar. The other conference I was able to attend last week, BYU had an educational conference, and they invited Judge Thomas Griffiths, who is a former judge on the DC circuit. He was appointed by President Bush. He's actually one of my legal heroes. And it was really fascinating. He talked about navigating our current difficult world. He said that there's some research out there that shows that our country has never been this divided since the Civil War. The Civil War is the only time as a nation that we have ever been more divided than we are currently. And he gave a lot of really interesting statistics that really demonstrate that. And he talked about the miracle of the 1787 Constitutional Congress and why that was so successful. He provided some information about the rules of the convention that I didn't realize. One was that, and this is part of why they succeeded. One was that they had mandatory attendance. If you weren't there, they were going to go drag you out of your bed and bring you there. The second was when someone was speaking, you could not only not interrupt, but you couldn't even read anything else during their speeches. You had to pay attention. The third was voting was all done in secret. They did not record how people could vote because they allowed for people to change their minds. They were convinced that if you could get people in a room together and get them to really hear one another, you might be able to actually agree and come to consensus. He applied these principles to a modern day example in Loudoun County. And he said, you know, a lot of you probably watched on Fox News some of what happened in Loudoun County, Virginia, and some of the meetings that happened with school boards and how ugly that got. And he said there was a woman in that community that was part of an evangelical community that she was watching what was happening, particularly around the transgender issues. And she reached out to Equality Loudoun and said, would you be willing to talk with some of members of the evangelical community? And they said, well, we'll talk to you. We're not so sure about the others. And so she sat down, got to know them, and they said, the first part of the meeting was just spent getting to know each other as human beings. And then the next part of the meeting, they sat down and really started to get to issues. And over time, they felt more and more comfortable, like, hey, we can start to expand this group and have some more conversations about some of these difficult issues. It turns out that by the end of the 10 hot button issues, they were able to come up with solutions for 8 of them. And this was driven by a member of their community. And it made a really big difference in what happened later with that school district and with that group in Loudoun County at large. And I thought that was so fascinating and so instructive about the fact that it doesn't matter how extreme our differences are, there are ways to be able to functionally work together and to learn from history and to learn from modern examples of history of how people are navigating difficult issues. We've had our share on this board. We've had everything from the masks issues to, you know, there's been a lot, right? But I just, it again, kind of gave me a renewed hope in the fact that as a community, I believe that we can work through and navigate through difficult things that are here and the things that are coming that we don't know about yet. And to continue to apply the things that our founding fathers taught us through their example. And I think of that especially as we're coming up on our on the 4th of July, when I look back and consider what they were able to accomplish during such a difficult time. And then again, you know, during the Civil War, they would probably laugh if we told them that our issues are insurmountable. I think they would say, I think you can do this. You can figure it out. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Edel.
So I too was not able to make the last board meeting like Mont. However, I was over in Africa, in Morocco, participating in a humanitarian civic assistance visit with our partners in Morocco with the Utah Air National Guard, where we set up a field hospital and provided medical care to rural members of the community there. And that was a fantastic event. And as soon as I'm cleared to post some pictures, then I hope to be posting some pictures. So anyone who wants to see some of the fantastic work we did out there will be able to see it. Now that I'm back, though, I'm super excited to be getting into things. Obviously, we have lots of committee meetings that happen during the summer. And then I've also started getting a head start on planning back to school and getting into schools and meeting with people. I was not able to attend the NSBA meeting this year, so I don't have a report on that. But Karen brought up AI, and so I do want to mention just a second the importance that we make sure we don't fall into the trap of fear mongering. Unfortunately, I don't believe that anyone here is leaning toward that, but it's just so important. A lot of times when there's brand new technologies that come out, people get scared, and they get scared for no reason. We've had lots of technological advancements over time, but yet schools have computers. Schools have all sorts of technologies that we have to embrace and to use. We just have to figure out how. I applaud all of the professionals and educators out there who have leaned forward to try out the new technologies and learn how they work. And I guess my hope is that in the not too distant future, we'll be able to, as a whole, figure out how to embrace and how to incorporate these new technologies into our learning so that they can enhance the students' use, enhance the classrooms, and really make it a better learning place.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Edel. Mrs. Nybar?
Thank you. I'd like to begin my comments tonight to recognize our Principal Daryl Jensen, who's leaving to Provo City School District as Assistant Superintendent. It's been such a pleasure to get to know him better and work with him. There's a quote that I think really encapsulates Daryl's leadership. It says, "A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say we did it ourselves." And I've had so many faculty members reach out to me and say that Daryl had a great balance of they always felt supported, but they never felt micromanaged. He always gave them, autonomy and the opportunity to grow their programs and make it their own and to achieve success. And I just think that's so great. I was just recently talking to John Hanson in the business department. He was talking about when we first dedicated times for PLCs and how he was a little skeptical and some of his colleagues were. And then through training and things under the principal, they were able to do these PLCs that were amazing and what came out of them. And one of the things that came out of them was really developing strong relationships with corporate entities to come in and do power lunches for the kids and to look at the lineup of speakers that they had. They had the owner of all the Jimmy Johns in the state of Utah. They had Dime Cosmetics. They had a Fortune 500 company that flew in their CEO from California. And they had all these really neat experiences for these kids to draw from. And it came from dedicated time in their PLCs of what they could do to better strengthen these kids' opportunities in business and to be able to see it from the other side. So I just thought that was so awesome. I've had a lot of parents reach out to me, a lot of parents reaching out to me and say, he gave me his cell phone. How many principals give you their cell phone and the relationships? I had a parent, we just recently have had a tragedy in the Corner Canyon community, a family whose older son, who was an alumni of Corner Canyon, died in a tragic accident. And as we were in the yard and doing yard work, we had our coaches there, a bunch of people there from Corner Canyon. And one of the moms rushed up to me and said, "Oh no, I heard Daryl's leaving." And she said, "He knows my kids' names." And I've had several kids go through Corner Canyon. He knows each of their names. And I thought that was a neat commentary. The kids really love him, and parents and faculty. And so I am excited for him and his new venture as Assistant Superintendent at Provo City School District, but just wanted to say thank you for the 7 years he spent at Corner Canyon and for the direction and leadership he provided and how much he is so well loved by his staff and faculty and parents and students. Even my son came to me, is it true? So, just want to say best of luck to him and congratulations on leading the first, in state of comprehensive high schools for Corner Canyon. I wanted to talk about NSBA. I went to a really good conference breakout session regarding school safety. And there was some staggering statistics at the beginning talking about mental wellness, that 44% of students feel persistently sad. It's a huge number. And obviously we have a whole, sphere dedicated in our strategic plan to human-centered supports. And they talked about also how research shows and evidence-based that intervention has always been possible with school shootings. And it was the lack of intervention is what they're looking at. They talked about schoolsafety.gov resources and grants, state info sharing tools with grants, actionable tools like the safety readiness tool. You can go on and look at your safety readiness. They talked about, of course, detections with cameras. They talked about early detections with school climate and the power of hello, and just saying hello and helping, every child feel like they matter. They talked about trainings for de-escalation. They talked about creating a sort of triage step with starting conversations with young people where you get your community leaders involved, church leaders, school leaders, and of course law enforcement, to meet from time to time and have regular conversations about any disaffected youth in the community. They also talked about how important it is to have routine conversations as faculty and staff to be sure that all the staff know what to do in the event of an active shooter, that they know where the key places are for power shut off. They did talk about how it recently in 2 last shootings that one time a faculty member hit the emergency evacuation, and what it did is it funneled all the kids into the hallway, which made it more easy for the active shooter to have people to shoot at. And so, talking about, hey, if it's even just, something that I put down here, I don't know that they said this, but I was just thinking once a quarter in faculty meetings for faculty to go through circumstances and, to know what to do in the event of and where they're going to go and what's going to happen and what procedures can happen. For a custodian to be able to check. Another time the active shooter was the one that pulled the drill. And so everyone went out into the hallway. And so and the one thing they talked about is that there's a custodian that's responsible to go ensure that that doesn't happen, or that has a radio that can say, hey, this was, pulled, this wasn't us, this is the active shooter. So they talked about how plans need to be robust and practiced enough, because in these events, it's always dynamic and it never happens linearly. And so the more robust your plan is, and the more practiced you are, the greater chance for success. And I just thought as we look at, I sit on that safety committee, and we talked about analyzing our schools and looking at, which schools we feel can be strengthened as far as, with also the level of vulnerability they are maybe placed locally if they're near freeways, different things like that, for getaways and things like that, as well as we talked about following disaffected youth and things like that. So I thought that was very helpful, and I learned about some different grants. And then another workshop we went to, we've already had a presentation about that we're going to start implementing, that our superintendent has the information for, but I really appreciated that conference and thought it was excellent. And that's all I have for tonight. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I first want to tell Leon happy birthday, and I forgot to say it earlier tonight, so really sorry. Now it's out that it is his birthday. He got to spend it with us all day. So I'm sure he's super happy about it. Oh, that's good. Anyway, happy birthday, Leon. Yeah. Hey, there was some cake, but there were no candles, so sorry about that. So I just want to talk about just two things really quickly. The keynote talk on AI was really, really good. That's like one of the things where I really learned a lot about the Chat GPT and AI, and just like Andrew said, how to not be afraid of it and how we just need to learn how to use it to help us. I saw a quote on Twitter, and it was from an AI summit that was just a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was really good. It said, "I don't think AI will take your job per se, but I do think those people who use AI will." Anyway, I just thought that was really good, and it just I don't know. I think at some point, I know our teachers are trying to figure out how to use it, and I know there's already trainings going on. So I would love, yeah, I mean, I would love as a board at some point, maybe
I think we
have
need
it
to
on the
coordinate
agenda,
that somehow.
yeah,
That's
and figure out
pilot too.
training or figure out what's happening and
I would
Maybe the
suggest in high
superintendent.
quality learning, that committee, that'd be a great place for that discussion.
talk about that.
Yeah. They did do some training at the Digital Teaching Learning Conference. I actually went to it, trying to think of our specialists that did the training, but it was great. And it was a lot around really designing the use of AI with learning intentions. You know, some might include more AI where students are actually breaking down the text. Others was more, it's not really appropriate for some type of responses, but it was a scaffolding of when to use it and when not. And I was super impressed. So, I mean, so far, I think it's been good, but maybe having that discussion and then getting that presentation into the full board would be great too.
Okay, let's do that. And the next class I went to that was really good was on mental health supports. And I went to that with the superintendent, with Mrs. Nybar. And I think we all really, really liked it. And it was the Cook Center for Human Connections. And they have a lot of free resources. There are some paid resources also for like specific like parent coaching and for mental health, like a virtual series on mental health for parents. So I don't know. I know in human centered supports, we are talking about it. We got a quote for them. So I just want to like continue to move that forward because I mean, you just put like a link on your website and parents can go and like search, they set up an account, but then there's just all these classes that parents can they're just recordings. They can just listen, like, how do you talk to your kid if they're depressed? How do you deal, if they're suicidal? Anyway, I think it's some really good resources and I really hope we can look further into that. And that is all. So thank you, everyone. Just remember that our next meeting, we changed the date because of some conflicts, and it will be July 18th at 4:30. So we changed that date, just a reminder. Okay, everyone, thank you. Finish before 9. Thanks, everyone.